โมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนะมัสสามิ Your blessings. Probably the hardest part of the Buddhist path is the practice of meditation, what we call meditation, but the word might be bhavana, used often by the Buddha, which means mental development, mental cultivation. And it's not always easy to train the mind because the mind is untrained. We haven't practiced enough or trained it enough in the past. So when you come to train your mind in meditation, often it takes a while to settle down. It's frustrating, annoying, disappointing. And so a lot of people don't even want to try. Maybe they've heard too many things about it, bad things. There's those people who say, oh, doesn't it make you go mad? Or won't you end up seeing ghosts and getting frightened, and so on and so forth. They often have excuses. But probably more common is just people may have tried it a little bit and realized it's not necessarily an easy thing to train your mind. Maybe they already have a lot of stress and challenges in their life from work and family and relationships, and it seems like meditation would just add one more stress to the whole mix, and so it's like, no, not ready for that. And of course, if it was very easy, then everyone would be good at it and everyone would get enlightened quickly and easily. But it's unlikely people are going to get enlightened quickly and easily because we haven't done it enough, we haven't practiced enough. For one who has practiced a lot, yeah, maybe it's quick and easy. Like the Buddha, on the night of his enlightenment, he'd done all the groundwork. He'd practiced for 6 years outside the palace in the forest and for many, many lifetimes, we believe. So he was ready and got enlightened in one night. But most people are going to take a bit longer than that. So that's an important factor to bring into your thinking if you do begin meditation, is to be patient and maybe not build up too many expectations, high expectations. But then of course it's always possible you can become pleasantly surprised, and that does happen quite often too. People find their mind settles down quicker and easier than they thought, at least sometimes. Also, developing some understanding of what we're doing and why is helpful. So in meditation, the two main aspects are the cultivation of calm, peace of mind, stillness of mind, or what we collectively call samadhi. And then using that as a basis, calming the mind down, then developing insight, clear knowledge and vision of the way things are. Insight, we use other words like panya, wisdom, or discernment. But these two aspects, developing calm and insight, support each other. Ajahn Chah said they're like two ends of the same stick. You have one stick, you have two ends, and you pick the stick up, both ends come up together. So as you train in meditation, you're developing both calm and insight. What you might call a win-win situation. You gain more than you think maybe when you meditate. But particularly the calm, the stillness that you're developing as you practice mindfulness and train in mindfulness is important for stabilizing, steadying your mind and freeing it from distraction and the normal kind of moods and agitations and sleepiness that affects us, and brings the mind to a point where it's easier to see the truth or know the truth, and the kind of truth you're knowing is you have clear knowledge rather than making guesses or just following beliefs, which is normally we're working on the level of belief. We have ideas that we've acquired from other people or our own thinking, but they're just ideas and belief that are not yet necessarily tested or coming from our own direct knowledge. But insight in Buddhism and Buddhist meditation is developing this ability to really know from direct knowledge through your own experience. What are you knowing? Well, mainly just this body and mind, yourself. And from that you get to know a lot more about the world around you as well. But first of all, getting to know yourself. And to know it in an unbiased way. Because that's another problem that you'll meet straight away. If you say myself, you already have a lot of ideas about who you think you are, what you are, good and bad, often more bad than good. We're great at looking at ourselves critically and negatively. But that's all these ideas that we've accumulated and carry around with us. But the kind of insight that comes from stillness or from samadhi is just seeing more deeply the way things are, in a very natural way, not a forced way, and not trying to reason everything through or work it out logically, but just observing and recognizing the nature, we say the nature of phenomena, physical phenomena and mental phenomena. And not adding on opinions and views and beliefs, but just observing. So a very natural kind of process of, they often call it awakening or developing clear knowledge or clearer knowledge. But the stillness, the calm, supports that. Because when the mind is calm from the presence of mindfulness, from the presence of samadhi, then it's able to look without always jumping around and reacting and getting lost in whatever it's looking at, whatever it's experiencing. And that could be anything. It could be inner thoughts and memories, stuff bubbling up, or it could be external, what we call sense contact, sights, sounds, taste, smell, touch. Normally we're reacting to all of this all the time and linking things together with chains of thoughts, ideas, with emotions coming up, some positive, some negative. And it's a big kind of jumbled mess really. So as you still the mind, calm the mind down by practicing mindfulness, the jumbled mess sort of settles down and you get the chance to see things more clearly as they are, what's going on. A good example of this is the often quoted story about Ajahn Chah when he went to England, and when they began in the first place where the monks who went from Ajahn Chah to the UK to start setting up a monastery, teach Buddhism with Ajahn Sumedho. They were staying in a place called Hampstead Vihara on Hampstead High Street, so a busy high street which had shops and pubs and traffic and things and people. It was just a house, so it wasn't an ideal situation for monks to live or practice meditation, but that's all they had. And monks are beggars, and beggars can't be choosers, so sometimes you have to put up with less than ideal conditions. and you have to rely more on the qualities of your practice, mindfulness and wisdom, but those are things that are developing in an ongoing way. So the monks were learning to be patient with the conditions, learning to meditate, and then Ajahn Chah went to visit, and on a warm summer's evening, UK summer's evening, with the windows open, a group of monks and laity gathered to hear teachings from Ajahn Chah and to meditate with him. And just as the meditation began, so did the pub rock band across the road, which this is in the 1970s when British pub rock bands were very loud, a lot of electrical equipment and amplification, and unfortunately a lot of them were not very good, so it was loud and not very melodious. And they started at the same time as the meditation session, and everyone was panicking, thinking, oh, Ajahn Chah will be disappointed with this situation, and perhaps we should end the meditation early. When of course Ajahn Chah, being Ajahn Chah, perfectly mindful, wise, good control of his mind, a well-trained mind, didn't seem to be bothered or fazed by it at all, and he just sat and carried on sitting, unmoved, undisturbed, as the loud music went on and everyone was getting agitated. And later, of course, somebody asked him how he meditated with this loud music, and he said, there's this sound. Yeah, of course, he heard the sound. And he just asked a simple question, like a form of reflection. And was the sound disturbing you, or were you disturbing the sound? Which kind of gives a good idea of what's going on, what we're aiming for in meditation. It may not be an explanation of the entirety of the Four Noble Truths, which the Buddha taught, but it's giving you a little snippet, isn't it? When we have stress and suffering, it's because we're letting our mind go out and pick things up and get involved with things and carry them around and react to them. So with a sound, the sound is just a sound. It may be an unpleasant one, but it's just a sound. The suffering is our own reaction to it, and maybe the ideas we have around it, there shouldn't be this sound is not right, not fair, it's too loud, this shouldn't be happening, why did this happen, Ajahn Chah is here, this should never have happened, blah, blah, blah. But the actual sound is just sound, airwaves coming to the ear and then dropping away. And the suffering is what we make of it and add on to it. And so Ajahn Chah was just pointing that out, and he was living what he practiced. He was practicing what he lived, talking the truth as he knew it from his own experience, because he had a well-trained mind. And of course, throughout his whole life, teaching life, many, many different things, occasions occurred like that, where he would just bring people back to the simple truths of what they were experiencing or what was going on, and understanding where they're creating suffering because of their untrained mind. And as you develop more mindfulness, more stillness, the mind is able to contemplate, to know, to penetrate even into different things, to see more clearly what's going on. And then a question like, or an investigation or a reflection like, am I disturbing the sound, or is the sound disturbing me, or am I disturbing the sound, starts to make good sense. And if you don't let your mind move, then the sound is just sound and it passes away. Indeed, Ajahn Chah gave a talk about 10 years before that occasion in the UK, when he talked about a night of his own progress in the Dhamma. We don't really know whether he got enlightened that night, but many teachers have suggested it was a night when he developed deep insight. This was at a time, he gave a talk 10 years before in his monastery, but he was referring to a time when he was a young monk in the forest, meditating on his own, living on his own, doing lots of sitting and walking meditation, living very simply in the forest. But in the nearby village there was a festival, and in those days and even today, festivals in rural Thailand usually come with a sound system, a loud sound system, and they go all night. So you get this all-night music blaring. And if you're in the forest, usually the sound of the music carries up to whichever forest you're in, because the village is often not that far away, maybe a couple of kilometers. And so that night Ajahn Chah was walking, and he said his mind became so still as he practiced mindfulness that he could contemplate the loud noise coming from the village. And he said he reached a point where he could turn just to listen to the sound, contemplate it as anicca, impermanent, arising and ceasing, ear consciousness arising and ceasing. Or he could turn his attention inwards and completely ignore the sound and not notice it at all. He described this, it's in a talk called, sometimes it's called The Key to Liberation, sometimes Unshakable Peace, so you can go and read that talk. And he obviously had many other deep insights that night. This is one part of it, but he was talking about how he was so peaceful and mindful that he could choose whether to listen or not, and it obviously was not bothering him at all. And then 10 years later he gave that similar reflection to the Londoners who were meditating with him with loud music in the background. It's a good example of how, as your mind becomes more mindful and samadhi arises, a state of calm, which may last a short time or a long time when it's a deep state of calm. This puts the mind in the best position to contemplate or reflect on what's going on, using the Four Noble Truths as the guideline, the framework, because the aim of Buddha's teachings is to help us understand where suffering comes from and how to end it by abandoning the causes of suffering. This is the Four Noble Truths. If your mind is quiet and still and mindful and in samadhi, then you can contemplate those Four Noble Truths much better. And so they say the mind is, in samadhi, it's workable, it's ready, it's workable, it's malleable, because you can start looking at your experience from different angles, but in an unbiased way. So something like sound, you can look at the sound, look at your reaction to the sound, and start untangling why you might be suffering over a loud sound, for instance. The emotions that come up, the feelings, the sensations, but also the opinions and the attachment to various views also that might be stimulated with loud sound. Like things like, this shouldn't be happening, where's that coming from? Well, that may be an opinion you have that this is a night for meditation, there shouldn't be any music. That's just a view, isn't it? So, but when your mind is peaceful and still, maybe you can see that, how that's forming and how you attach to it. So Ajahn Chah was very skilled at helping people to do this, both leading them in the practice of mindfulness in all postures, all activities, whether it's working and cleaning and moving around the monastery, or in a formal meditation, sitting or walking meditation. Encouraging people and leading people in practicing mindfulness, and getting to them to the point where they can reflect on their experience. And he'd give lots and lots of examples and use different natural situations to help point the simple truths out. Simple truths, but very profound, that could sometimes give people very profound insights and breakthroughs in their own practice. So meditation has these two aspects, calm, insight, stillness, and wise reflection or discernment. They work together so that you can contemplate. Of course, practicing samadhi, you can go into deep states of one-pointedness, deep samadhi, where you can't contemplate. And they're not wrong, and they can be very valuable as a boost to your practice. But to contemplate, you have to come out of the deep state of samadhi and use a state of, a level of samadhi, you might say, where your mind can still experience the senses, can still contemplate and observe, but without being distracted. But Ajahn Chah would encourage people to reflect in this way, to calm the mind the best they could, to bring up the mindfulness that they could, and then to contemplate, reflect on their experience. And sometimes just asking simple questions. Another time, I remember there's another occasion, a policeman came to see Ajahn Chah. Quite often, policemen, civil servants, businessmen, army, air force, these kind of people would love to go and see Ajahn Chah and get encouragement and Dhamma teachings as well as making offerings. And this policeman went to see him and had a chat and was basically complaining about his life, how he tried to be an honest policeman, do his job, and it was very difficult because so many of the other policemen around him were not so honest. There was a lot of corruption, bending the rules, different practices which he tried to avoid himself. He tried to be straight, honest. He had great faith in the Buddha. He didn't want to break precepts and so on. But this actually made him both unpopular and drew a lot of criticism, and so he's often kind of ostracized by his colleagues, and he wouldn't advance. After being a policeman for many years, he hadn't really advanced up the ranks as you might expect. He wasn't given promotions and so on because he was actually very straight, very honest. So he came to see Ajahn Chah and said that this is a real problem for him. He's trying his best to be an honest, good policeman, and yet he's not advancing in his career and makes enemies and people don't like him. He has these problems. And he's feeling very disappointed, sort of despairing of his life. What can he do? And he sort of poured his heart out to Ajahn Chah. And Ajahn Chah, in his response, I'm sure he said many things, I wasn't there, but he said many things, but one thing he said was, he pointed to a big rock across the monastery forecourt, which is, if I remember right, is still there. It was a big rock placed as a sort of, it was a landscape rock done when they made the Uposatha hall. They put some rocks around the base of it. And he said, do you see that big rock over there? And the policeman said, yes. Ajahn Chah said, could you pick that up? And he said, no way. It's much too heavy, much too big. I'm just one man. I couldn't do that. So you know that you couldn't pick it up. Yeah, I know that. He said, well, problems are like that. If you don't pick something up, it's not a problem. What we tend to do in life is we keep picking things up, or trying to pick things up, fill our mind with them. If we don't do that, there's no problem. And the policeman got it. He worked that one out quite quickly, that the real problem wasn't his position, his job, his character. It was what he thought about it. And this despair and disappointment was all his own creation in his mind. Just another good example of how Ajahn Chah would help people to sort of cut through to see where they're really creating the suffering themselves in their situation. That doesn't mean to say that we don't have problems or problems don't arise, but it's when we pick them up and carry them around in our head or in our heart, it makes our heart heavy. That's what problems do when you attach to them. What we're supposed to do in the practice is recognize this problem is a problem, but I'm not going to carry it around with me. We might say not take it home with you. So most people go to work, they'll have some problems at work, things they don't like, things they want that they can't get, disappointments, frustrations, etc., etc. Those kind of problems are so normal. Every country, every workplace has them. But the real suffering is when you pick it up and take it home with you, isn't it? That's what makes you worry, can't go to sleep, can't sit and enjoy your food because you've got these problems weighing down on you, and so on and so on. The real problem is the carrying around of the problem, the making it into a heavy rock that just weighs you down. That's the real suffering. Problems always have solutions, and sometimes that takes time and effort, but the suffering is when you pick it up and just keep carrying it around and thinking about it, worrying about it. And this is something you learn in meditation again, how to calm the mind using mindfulness, and then just to see that very fact that maybe whatever the suffering is, it's because you're picking up and carrying around worries about your body, your health, your relationships, your job, the world, World War III, etc., etc., etc. We love to pick up things and carry around, fill our mind with them, fill our heart with them, and carry them around. But meditation is giving you some skillful means to not do that. Of course, it takes practice. Mindfulness takes practice. Wise reflection, discernment takes practice. Sometimes you'll get things, understand things quickly. Other times you just have to keep looking, keep calming your mind, and then keep reflecting until something clicks, until light is shone on the issue, and then the mind realizes. But if you've had any success, it could be just some small little success, like you practice mindfulness, calm down, and you have some pain in your leg, and you realize the pain is just a feeling that you can bear with, be with, and then you let go of all the negative thoughts around that feeling, or the sense of self forming around the feeling. You let that go, and then you realize, you can do that. You can be with a painful feeling, but not endlessly be thinking negative thoughts. Maybe you can start with something small like that, and then some of these other big problems, relationships and work and money and health and all these things, you can learn to use the same method to deal with them and stop carrying them around. What did the Buddha say? The Buddha said, and Ajahn Chah for that matter as well, the Buddha said, don't dwell in the past, meaning don't carry the past around in your head. We have memory, it's just a function of mind, but what we tend to do is we keep holding on to the memories, reliving them, grabbing them, holding on them, make them heavier and heavier. Either disappointment that we can't have the pleasure that we had before, can't keep it, can't hold on to it, we've kind of lost it. Or the suffering of remembering and dwelling on unpleasant, painful things that happened in the past, failures, mistakes made, and so on, dragging them around. They become a heavy weight. You're learning to put things down, putting the past down, and putting down thoughts of the future as well, which largely is worry and anxiety, but also expectation, hopes, expectations, excitement about possibilities, but often, as we know, very uncertain. Sometimes those possibilities don't arise, don't happen. But quite often the things we worry about and anxious about also don't happen. And yet we weigh our mind down in the present moment by first of all, not calming down enough to see what's going on, or even if we're more calm, not practicing or utilizing wise reflection to see this is something that's impermanent, not self. It can be just put down, let go of. We don't realize that if we don't train in wise reflection. So the Buddha said, put the past down, put the future down, even put the present moment down, meaning whatever you're experiencing right now and whatever reaction is arising, don't hold on to that either, let it go. So as you meditate, this is why we keep teaching the same thing. Come back to the present moment. Develop mindfulness, strong mindfulness, continuous mindfulness, so that you can put down the past, the future, and even the present. And putting down doesn't mean cutting off everything. It's like going back to the story about the loud sound. the loud, bad rock music sound. You might not be able to stop that sound floating around, coming to your ear, but it's learning to just put it down again. You hear it and then you put it down, rather than picking it up and reacting to it and getting annoyed by it, say. Just knowing it and putting down. Even in the present moment, the pleasure, the pain, the interesting things, the boring things, the excitement, stimulation, the aversions, things coming up in the present, we have to learn to be mindful enough to put them down too. You know things and you put down. Sometimes monks, meditation monks, when they talk about the practice, that's one way we measure the development of the mind, the training and development of the mind. We say, how quickly can you put things down? Whether it's something that just happened now, just something you just experienced now, it could be a thought, or it could be something external, or it could be thoughts about the past, the future, but how quickly do you put things down? And you can even, sometimes just contemplate for yourself. What are the things that you really find difficult to put down? So there'll be a list of things you really like, depending on what your particular desires and attachments are. So it could be thoughts, sexual fantasies are probably number one, but it could be just various fantasies about things you want to do, places you want to go, people you want to know, and so on. And then also things that haven't happened that you don't want to happen, so things we worry about, anxiety. You'll know some of your pet loves and pet hates, pet worries. We say pet because a pet is something you feed and look after all the time, so you get used to keeping it close to you and keeping an eye on it. And mental defilements and craving are a bit like that. So you'll know some of your pet desires and aversions. And just for an exercise, once you know what they are, can I really put this down? And even straight away, when you think of something you really like, some indulgence maybe, thoughts that you indulge in regularly maybe, you challenge yourselves that, that's something I've really got to learn to be mindful of and let go. Even then, straight away, there'll be part of the mind just says, nope, you're not going to let go of me, I want to carry on indulging, whatever it may be. And pet hates as well. If you bring up things that you're averse to and states of mind where you've been annoyed, angry, or even in hatred before, maybe the desire for revenge, resentment, so on, you bring them up. And this is, at a time when you're just calm, nothing much is happening, bring them up and ask yourself, can I let go of this? And part of your mind will probably straight away say, no, I'm not ready to let go of that. If you're really angry with someone, no, I'm not ready to forgive and let go, not ready to stop thinking about it or holding on to the anger. And you'll have a whole list of reasons maybe why you're not ready to let go. But almost immediately you'll know there'll be certain things in your mind you're still not ready to let go of. And that's where you have to work. Developing mindfulness and meditating is, developing the calm and the stillness is only one part of it. Training in wise reflection and bringing that to bear on your own body and mind, your own attachments, is the other part, and that takes practice. So sometimes we even need to kind of push ourselves a bit. So if you are calm and your mind is more still from meditation, bring things up, test yourself. Think of that person that makes you angry, or that situation that makes you angry. Think of that situation that brings fear, or the thing in your life that brings fear. When you're calm, just gently turn your mind to it and see if you can cope with just thinking about it, but using wisdom and wise reflection to see if you can see the suffering of your attachment. It's only when you see the suffering, the harm of it, that you'll be willing to put it down. And if in your normal state of mind you're not ready to do that, then of course it's because your mind is not calm enough to see the harm of what you're doing, holding on. You have to see that aversion, that fear, that lustful desire, or that attachment as a heavy rock that you're just dragging around, oppressing yourself. You have to see it like that so that you'll start trying to put it down. See the benefit of putting it down. The calm, mindful state of mind will help you, but you still have to reflect, you still have to train in that. So sometimes you bring these things up out of the blue and just test yourself and ask questions and look at things. Why do I attach to this? Why can't I put this down when I'm suffering so much? So there has to be a sincere wish to free yourself from that suffering, and you have to recognize it as suffering. And that's why the practice of mindfulness, states of stillness will help, because it gives you this more unbiased platform where you can see something as it is, an attachment as a cause of suffering, rather than my pet attachment, my best friend, the thing I want to hang on to most of all. Because of course if you're still thinking like that, your mind won't be wanting to let go. If you don't practice like this, if you don't bring it up ahead, what usually happens is you become very quiet and calm and still in your meditation, and then it will pop up anyway and catch you off your guard. And this is very common. And somebody actually puts a lot of effort into their meditation and become very peaceful, and they don't realize around the corner there's some object of mind that just pops up, some strong emotion, some memory, some way of thinking, or some stimulation that immediately puts them in or helps them, or makes them experience a strong emotional reaction. It could be anger, greed, fear, worry. Sometimes it's just life is unpredictable, so you have news about problems that come up in your life, problems at work, problems in your relationship, problems with health. Sometimes it's sort of sudden news, bad news maybe. Sometimes it's just events conspire to bring up something as you're calm and peaceful, enjoying your peace, and that, partly that's the problem. We become a bit complacent sometimes when we are peaceful. But you're peaceful and then you just turn to think of something without realizing, the burden of that attachment is with you again, and it can pull you right out of the peace, and you're back with sadness, regret, states of agitation, and then you feel very disappointed with your meditation because you feel like, this meditation has not achieved anything for me. So you have to be ready for that. You have to be strong, patient, but train in wise reflection, and wise reflection is not always easy. To actually look at things and see them in light of the Four Noble Truths is not always easy, because we're so used to certain ways of thinking, certain emotional reactions. We're just so used to it, we're not yet ready to look at it in an unbiased, objective way from the mind of stillness. But we have to practice, we have to try. Sometimes you go in small bursts, so you might meditate for a while and you feel more calm, your mindfulness may be more steady, and you use that as a platform, so you do start contemplating something, and the mind may for a little while be gaining some understanding, insight, but then it starts to degenerate and you're back with more normal emotional reactions to things, distractions, worries, anger, desires. They return. At that point, if you're sharp enough, quick enough, you come back to your mindfulness. Because if you're already calm, maybe you've been meditating for a while, you come back to that calm then, just come back to it and do your best to let go of everything, and you don't have to contemplate. And that's all right. Sometimes it's all right not to contemplate, not to use your mind in that way, but just to come back and rest. It's another one of the roles of samadhi, say, is to give the mind a rest. And then when you feel more rested, if you're practicing for a period of time, you're more rested, then you kind of venture out again to try some contemplation. And there's this back and forth where you try contemplating. It may go well for a while, but sooner or later it starts to all fall apart and you're just sort of starting to become distracted, bored, whatever. And you quickly come back to your main meditation object and just rest there again. And quite often we have this back and forth. But over time, maybe the level of insight and understanding grows. And you do start to challenge some of those cherished attachments that have caused you so much suffering over the years. Maybe finally you realize it's time to put them down. You get tired of the suffering. What we call nibbida, this phrase, nibbida, that comes from insight, where you see to attach, to want, to not want, to attach to things, it's suffering. You're recognizing a heavy rock as a heavy rock, rather than as part of you that you're sort of cherishing and keeping with you for a long time. Now you finally realize, oh, this is a rock to be put down. And you keep putting it down until you finally do. And if you're really tired of suffering and you really see the harm of it, then you will put it down eventually. And you say, I'm not going to pick that up again. It's too heavy and it's too much suffering. Like the rock that the policeman saw. It's like, there's no point picking it up. You're just going to suffer. So you don't. You might call that wisdom. Rock wisdom. Where you recognize suffering as suffering, and therefore you don't want to pick it up and hold on to it in your life, in your mind. So Ajahn Chah was very good at getting people to see this in different ways. And obviously Ajahn Chah got his wisdom from the Buddha. So the Buddha was probably even better at it. It's just the Buddha passed away a long time ago, so we don't have fresh kind of teachings from the Buddha. Luckily we have the Tripitaka. But Ajahn Chah was around in people's living memory, and he seemed to really understand how to get this point across. That, we suffer because we make ourselves suffer, because we don't yet see the harm of what we're doing. But as you practice mindfulness and investigate the truth, reflect on the truth, you come to see what you're doing, and hopefully you start putting things down, letting them go. So maybe I'll leave the talk there for tonight, and if there's any questions after this, we'll do our best to answer them.